Hello, my name's Paul Geyer, and I'm here today to chat with you about another one of the Eat and Learn programs from the Clubhouse Press. Today we will be talking about ethical issues in design build. The design build construction delivery process has become increasingly popular. Does it present ethical issues for engineers? Can these issues be effectively managed? First, a little bit about me. For 35 years, I was what I characterize as a straight-ahead designer cranking out drawings and specifications for the construction of buildings and related infrastructure. For an additional 9 years, I was a principal staff advisor to the California legislature specializing in capital outlay and infrastructure issues. It was during this period that the design build construction delivery process was a very significant public policy issue in California. And I was called upon to do extensive research on the topic and develop recommendations for the members of the legislature. This is what I was doing at that time. I was a principal fiscal and policy analyst on the staff of the Joint Legislative Budget Committee of the California Legislature. And 8 years of that time, approximately, were devoted to public policy issues associated with implementation of the design build process in California state and local government procurement. Here is how I'll be talking about things today. Some introductory comments, some additional comments about what is design build, and then I want to talk about two background type issues that I would like to have you keep in mind as we move forward. The first one is that there is a distinction between a construction delivery process and a construction procurement process. The second point is that in procurement, any kind of government or private company procurement, contracts can be awarded based on two different kinds of criteria: subjective criteria or objective criteria. Then moving on to chapter 5, if you will, I will try to frame what I believe to be the ethical issues that are presented by the design build delivery process. And then in chapter 6, I will suggest two ways of resolving these ethical issues. And I do this because I believe that there are aspects of the design build process that are worth retaining as an option for an owner. And I believe that we can retain those options in two ways. Now, as we all know, design build is a process for undertaking construction process and projects, and it has become increasingly popular. It has been used to a substantive degree by private owners for many decades, but it was rarely used by public agency owners because competitive bidding laws required separation of the design and construction contracts. Designers, and this incorporates professional engineers and architects, were retained under contract or employed in-house by public agencies to prepare definitive drawings and specifications, which were the basis for competitive bidding by construction contractors. Now, a little aside comment, I will be usually talking in terms of the perspective of a public agency owner, but my comments are equally applicable to private owners. It would, in my view, be naive to suggest that construction contractors ever enjoyed obtaining their work by competitive bidding. Indeed, I believe the opposite is the case. By astute interaction with public policies makers, however, the construction industry has done an excellent job of changing the laws and regulations in most of the United States. Along with this, construction contractors have convinced more private owners that they, general contractors, are a convenient one-stop source of complete design and construction services. Indeed, very few construction contractors who can afford the cost of a pickup truck do not have a sign on the side that says design build. This situation raises ethical issues for professional engineers and architects, designers. It raises ethical issues for public agency and private company managers, many of whom may also be professional engineers. And it raises business issues for private owners that they would be wise to consider. Here's what I'll be talking about today. Design build, as we all know by now, is a process whereby an owner contracts with a single entity to both design and construct a project. Nominally, this entity could have complete design and construction staff, quote, in-house, end quote, and there are a small number of very large companies that do have those capabilities in-house. However, in practice, projects are still undertaken as they always have been. In design build, one entity contracts with the owner to provide complete design and construction services, and that entity then subcontracts the majority, if not all, of the actual work to a variety of subcontractors. Since the design build process has become prevalent, the entity contracting with the owner is almost always a construction entity, that is, a general contractor. No doubt this pattern will continue in the future because A, general contractors have demonstrated over many decades that they are much better marketers than our professional engineers, and B, state laws provide generally that only a licensed construction contractor can enter into a contract with an owner to provide construction services. So the situation on the design build ground is that professional engineers, and again, when I use the term professional engineers, I am including architects, traditionally trained architects in that, are contracted to or employed by construction contractors. This is in contrast to the traditional design bid build process, where the engineer has been contracted to or is employed by a public or private owner. Before going further here, let's frame this discussion. First, let's understand the difference between a construction delivery process and a construction procurement process. And then let's understand how contracts, including design build contracts, can be awarded using objective criteria or using subjective criteria. A construction delivery process, in my view, defines basically two things: the contractual relationships between participants in the project and the authorities, processes, and reporting relationships. For example, in the traditional design bid build process, which is actually a combined construction delivery and procurement process, the designer, the professional engineer, is under contract to or employed by the owner. The engineer is paid by the owner, takes direction from the owner, reports to the owner, and is responsible for acting in the best interests of the owner. On the other hand, say a plumbing subcontractor is under contract to the general contractor, is paid by the general contractor, takes direction from the general contractor, reports to the general contractor, and is generally bound to comply with the direction of the general contractor. This is a picture here of the simplified, the traditional design bid build process, with the engineer being paid by, taking direction from the owner. The engineer undertakes to prepare definitive working drawings and specifications for the project. The owner puts them out to competitive bid to general contractors, and once a contract is entered into, then the general contractor is working or being paid by the owner with the advice of the designer, the engineer. In the design build process, the engineer's position is different. The engineer is under contract to or employed by, is paid by, reports to, and takes non-technical direction from the general contractor. The engineer is in the same position as any other subcontractor working for the general contractor on the project. This is a picture of the, again in a simplified way, of the organizational structure in the design build process. The general contractor enters into a contract with the owner to both design and build the project. Then the general contractor has a whole series of subcontractors, plumbing contractors, sheet metal contractors, concrete subcontractors. All of these are subcontractors, and included in that group of subcontractors is the designer, the engineer. Now, a construction procurement process. What it does is it defines the criteria for award of a contract and the process for award of a contract. There are two types of criteria for awarding contracts, including design build contracts: subjective and objective. This is true of contracts awarded by private owners as well as public agency owners. Depending on the criteria to be used for awarding a contract, different processes may be used. There is nothing that prevents the use of the design build construction delivery process with an objective construction procurement process. Almost every implementation, however, of design build has been done by altering traditional competitive bidding laws, regulations, policies, and practices to permit contract award to be based on subjective criteria. Subjective criteria for award of public and private contracts are criteria which the awarding entity, such as a contract award panel in a public agency, or a person, such as a public agency or private company manager, inherently has discretion in deciding to whom to award a contract. When exercising that discretion, the awarding entity or manager can use what may be called overt criteria, such as qualifications, experience, best value. The words used vary, but the nature of criteria that may be enunciated fall into one of these categories. These are the criteria that are typically declared by the owner will be used in making award decisions. The concepts underlying the criteria are laudable. Award the contract to the most qualified competitor, award the contract to the most experienced contractor, award the contract to the competitor who will deliver best value to the awarding agency or company, But in making judgments about which competitor is best qualified, most experienced, or will deliver the best value, subjective judgments must be made. When subjective judgments are permitted in the award process, there is the opportunity for inappropriate, covert criteria to be used, such as political patronage, exchange of favors, candidly, bribes, and personal relationships. In the case of a private owner or closely held private company, there is no reason why use of overt criteria for awarding a contract is inappropriate because the owner is spending his own money. But in the case of larger companies with stockholders, and certainly in the case of public agencies, the awarding managers are playing with other people's money and awarding contracts based on covert subjective criteria is, I believe, inappropriate. There can also be contracts awarded based on objective criteria. And objective criterion is one which does not permit the awarding managers to make subjective judgments that will influence the award process. There is only one, in my observation over many years, practical objective criterion, and that is lowest cost. With competitive bidding based on lowest cost, the ability of awarding managers to subjectively manipulate the process to deliver the contract to a favored competitor is eliminated. Now, these are some observations that I have made over the years. First of all, the concept of best value, which is often cited as an overt subjective criteria to be used. Although the award based on best value purports to be objectively based on cost, the reality is that many subjective judgments are inherent in arriving at a number that represents best value. For example, subjective assumptions must be made about the useful life and maintenance costs for building components, such as roofing and exterior cladding systems. And subjective judgments must be made about such intangibles as aesthetics, occupant comfort, and building efficiency. And the relative value of different criteria requires subjective judgments. For example, one of the following figures shows an actual award summary for a major design build contract awarded by the state of California on the basis of best value. These criteria can only be applied by awarding managers making subjective judgments. The weighting of criteria is subjective. Why is building performance plan worth 45 points instead of 46 or 44 or 50? Why is community outreach worth 15 points and not 13 or 21? Commonly, managers who wish to exercise subjective judgment in awarding contracts will use something called a point system to give the appearance of objectivity in the award process. Such point systems are not objective because subjective judgments must be made in determining how many points to award each competitor on specific subjective criteria. For example, judgments that one competitor's building aesthetics are worth 10 points and another's are worth 8 points, or that one competitor's management team is worth 15 points and another's is worth 18 points. These are inherently subjective. Following figures illustrate use by the state of California of point systems in awarding large design build contracts a while back. And it illustrates how simple it is to manipulate a subjective point system to award a contract to an inappropriately favored competitor. One of these figures shows the subjective criteria and the points awarded to competitors. Y is a small and disabled veterans utilization plan worth 400 points, and a life cycle cost analysis plan only worth 250 points. Y was Company A's design impact plan worth 107 points rather than 106 or 108 or 91. Y was Company B's design impact plan worth 100 points instead of 101 or 99 or 108 or 125. As the following figures show, a modest shifting of points would result in Company B, not Company A, getting the contract by merely shifting 4% of the possible points from Company A to Company B. There is this entirely different result. Or, as one of the following figures shows, if 10% of the maximum possible points were shifted from Company A and 1% from Company B to Company C would have been awarded the contract. The order of the competitors would have been completely reversed from ABC to CBA. All awarding managers avow the best intentions when permitted to exercise subjective judgment in a procurement process. No doubt many sincerely try to remain true to these intentions. There are always those, however, who place self-interest above that of their agency or company, and history has shown that bad drives out good. The only way to institutionalize long-term integrity of an agency's or company's procurement process is if it is based on the only practicable objective criterion, lowest cost as determined by competitive bidding. Here is, by way of illustration, a real contract awarded by the state of California about 10 to 15 years ago for a $500 million office complex to be procured using what at that time was the experimental or trial approach to awarding design build contracts. In terms of today's dollars, this would probably be pushing $1 billion. And you see the criteria that the public agency contract award panel defined, and you can, I'm sure, clearly see that these are very subjective statements of criteria. And you also see the point values that the award panel assigned to each of these criteria. And you can clearly see that these are subjective assignments of values. Here is a second contract, again by an agency of the state of California about 10 or 15 years ago. $126 million office building, today's dollars probably 250 million, something like that. The criteria are what you see. These were defined by the award panel. The distribution of points reflecting allegedly the value of the different criteria is what you see. And then in the three columns on the right, you see the points that the award panel awarded to three different competitors. You add them all up and you see that Company A got the contract. It had 3226 points. But to illustrate how easy it is to manipulate the award of these contracts, this shows that for that same project, if you merely shifted 4% of the maximum possible points from Company A to Company B, you could award the contract to Company B, because perhaps Company B was the largest contributor to the governor's reelection campaign, or some other inappropriate covert criteria. And here you see that by shifting a few more points one way or the other, You could, if you wanted to, if you were the awarding panel for the agency, you could award the contract to Company C. So clearly these point systems are a subterfuge. So there are ethical issues that are raised, in my view, when the design build process is employed. The first falls into the category of the conflicting owner and general contractor objectives. In a typical design build construction delivery process, the engineer is being paid by a general contractor. The general contractor, in many cases, will have obtained the design build contract by competitive bidding and is understandably concerned about reducing costs in order to maximize profit on the project. The general contractor reasonably will encourage those he has hired to work on the project, such as a professional engineer, subcontractor, or a plumbing subcontractor, to reduce costs as much as possible. This economic pressure with which the engineer is faced conflicts with the duty he would have under traditional design bid build to exercise his knowledge and skills to the benefit of the company or agency that will own the building or whatever the infrastructure project is. This conflict does not occur with design bid build. The other, the ethical dilemma then is, where is the dividing line between the engineer's responsibility to the economic interests of the general contractor who is employing him, paying him, and that he is taking direction from, and the cost, quality, and serviceability interests of the building owner. This is not an easy issue to resolve. The owner, whether a public agency or a private company, rightly wants to obtain the highest quality facility at the lowest possible price. The general contractor, quite reasonably, wants to maximize his profit on a job. Under the traditional design bid build process, the engineer was not caught between these conflicting objectives. The engineer was paid by the owner, and the engineer exerted his best efforts on behalf of the owner's interests. He did this by preparing definitive working drawings and specifications that would provide the owner with a facility of the highest quality and serviceability within the owner's budget, and then undertook to assure that that is what the owner received by inspecting the contractor's work. The integrity of the procurement process is also very important, because the award panel or the awarding managers are playing with other people's money. And design build contracts should not be based on subjective criteria that can be manipulated by managers in order to award contracts to inappropriately favored competitors. In other words, awarded to the competitor who made the largest contribution to the governor's election campaign. There is nothing inherent in the design build construction delivery process that necessitates awarding design build contracts based on subjective criteria. That the practice of doing so has developed and is widely employed is unfortunate. All of the real benefits of the design build construction delivery process can be realized for the benefit of the owner using a construction procurement process that utilizes objective criteria for award of the design build contract and thereby protects the integrity of the procurement process. This is true for both public agencies and private companies. Are there benefits of the design build process that are worth saving? Yes, there are, and there are two in my view. First, early involvement of the builder in the design process. We as engineers like to think that we know everything there is to know about designing and constructing buildings, but really we don't. And the good experienced builder or general contractor can contribute a lot to the design process. Secondly, a major benefit of the design build process is it removes the owner from disputes between designer and builder. In the in this industry, there will always be disputes that arise between the designer and the builder. The builder says that such and such was not shown on the drawings and such was erroneously delineated in the specifications, etc., etc. These disputes will always arise. Under the traditional design bid build, because the engineer is employed directly by the owner, according to the legal system that we have in this country, is liable for the designer or engineer's mistakes. And so the owner is dragged into these disputes between the designer and the builder. And the way things go in the real world, the owner will probably end up paying for the designer's mistakes. In the design build process, however, the owner is not dragged into these disputes because the designer, the engineer, is a subcontractor to the general contractor. And the owner, therefore, is not liable for the designer's mistakes or errors or whatever you might like to call them. So these are two aspects of the design build process that I believe are worth saving as an option for owners. So how do we retain design build as an option for an owner, whether a public agency or a private company? And I believe that there are two processes that can be used. And I call them two envelopes. And secondly, construction management with competitive bidding of trade subcontracts. First, let's talk about two envelopes. It is a proven system of procurement for public agencies and private companies. It's often used as an example by the Department of Defense to procure new military equipment and systems. It has seldom been used for buildings and infrastructure construction because of the generally satisfactory results that have been obtained by public agencies over many years using the traditional design bid build process. As more public agencies have come to believe there can be benefits to using a design build construction delivery process, two envelopes provides a procurement process that will protect the integrity of public agencies' procurement processes by assuring that contracts are awarded based on objective criteria. The two envelopes procurement process is proven to be objective while still allowing competitors the flexibility which proponents of the design build process claim is essential to its implementation. It has been used for decades by public agencies, most notably in the defense industry procurements, and it has rarely been used in construction procurement. Here are its fundamental steps. The owner prepares a statement of needs, probably needing professional assistance from engineers and architects. A request for proposals is prepared and circulated to interested competitors, who then prepare a technical proposal which they put in one envelope and a cost proposal, which they put in a second envelope. And the owner's statement of needs, in a simplistic way, might say, build me a 50,000, design and build me a 50,000 square foot 3-story office building. And the competitors, one might say, well, I can build the best building at the best cost and the best value if I build it out of wood. Another one might say, I'm going to build it out of concrete. Another one, I'm going to build it out of steel. Those are the technical proposals that go into one envelope, the technical proposal. Then in a second envelope, the competitors put their price. The envelopes are sealed. The technical proposals at the appointed day and time are opened by the owner. He reviews the technical proposals. Maybe he received 10. He looks at them and he makes his subjective judgment that, well, these 6 of the 10 satisfy my statement of needs. So these 6 competitors now move to the second step in the procurement process, which is the opening of the cost envelopes. The owner opens the cost envelopes, and the competitor that has the lowest price gets the contract. This allows the competitors flexibility in their technical proposals that they prepare. It allows the owner flexibility in making judgment decisions about whether or not the proposals satisfy his statement of needs. But when it comes down to, as they say, the rubber meeting the road, the contracting winning competitor is selected. The selection is made based on lowest cost, which is an objective criteria that cannot be manipulated in order to deliver the contract to an inappropriately favored competitor. That is, the competitor who made the biggest contribution to the governor's reelection campaign. And that is the 2 envelopes process. Now let's move on here to some comments about each step in the 2 envelopes process. First, where the first step where the agency defines the building that it needs. A building or any other infrastructure project is defined by preliminary drawings and outline specifications. The more definitive and detailed they are, the more likely the agency or company is to get what it needs. And if the definition of needs simply says design and build a 3-story 50,000 square foot office building, then that's the only criteria to be used in assessing whether or not the proposals that the competitors have submitted as their technical proposals meet the agency or owner's needs. So it's very important that the agency or company do an appropriate job of defining its needs, and that they are defined in terms of preliminary drawings, concept drawings, and outline specifications. So how definitive do these statement of needs, drawings, and specifications need to be? Well, I would suggest somewhere between 5 and 30% of typical working drawings should be about right. The bigger and more unique a project, the greater the need for more definition. Now, another point that I would like to make is that there is a distinction between needs and wants. What an agency needs is what is necessary to fulfill its mission, and the same for a private company. What it wants is not necessary, but would be nice to have, i.e. a brick facade, a VAV HVAC system, etc. Where this becomes an important distinction is when evaluating technical proposals. If 5 proposals all satisfy the agency's needs, there is a temptation for the awarding panel or managers to want to select one over the others because there is a subjective judgment that it offers features it would be nice to have. Opening the door to subjective judgments opens the door for inappropriate influence in the procurement process. The way to avoid this temptation is to prepare a fully definitive job of preparing your statement of needs. If you want a brick facade, or if you need a brick facade or a VAV system, say so in your statement of needs. Moving on in the 2 envelopes process to the request for qualifications, RFQ. An RFQ limits competition and provides an opportunity for subjectivity to enter the procurement process. So the owner may decide that it wants the competitors to demonstrate that they are qualified to undertake his project. Tell me how many 3-story, 50,000 square foot office buildings you have designed and built in the last 10 years, whatever. So the procurement process may be preceded by a request for qualifications stage, but it's important to make sure that the RFQ is one that is not overly restrictive. And parenthetically, one of the best RFQ criterion from the standpoint of objectivity and efficacy is bonding capacity, simply because bonding companies thoroughly investigate the companies that they are willing to provide bonds for. And so a lot of the investigation of the qualifications of the competitors is done simply by requiring bid bonds and performance bonds. To minimize the risk of subjectivity and foster competition, the statement of qualifications evaluation is better if it is pass-fail rather than shortlist or ranking. It should be in writing. It's recommended, in my view, to avoid in-person presentations. Dog and pony shows, they're sometimes referred to, because they're simply a very poor way to evaluate competitors. And the criteria should be objectively evaluable. Items to include in an RFQ, request for qualifications: commitment of a bonding company to provide the required performance payment and bid bonds, verifiable history of successful completion of recent, say in the last 10 years, projects of similar size and scope, and a verifiable history of contested claims and litigation in, say, the last 10 years. Experience and qualifications of key personnel and subcontractors, including some project and legal history as required of prime, and commitments to their roles in the project. Any statutory and public policy commitments with public agencies such as small business set-asides, minority set-asides, etc. Statements of qualification should provide contractually enforceable commitments and verifiable information, not plans. A plan is simply a plan and it's meaningless. The evaluation of statements of qualification should be by a panel of, I emphasize, technically qualified professionals. Participation of political appointees or managers who are not technically qualified is not helpful. The history of successful completion of projects of similar size and scope, by the prime as well as the subcontractors should be verified. Project history should have fixed parameters such as 10 similar projects in the last 5 years. It's best if evaluation of statements of qualifications is on a pass-fail basis without ranking or shortlisting. The primary reasons for a competitor to fail should be because information provided cannot be verified or failure to make contractually enforceable commitments. Now, after the statement of qualifications has been processed, assuming one has been used, we move to the request for proposals. The technical proposals are submitted. One competitor says, I'll build it out of wood. Another says, I'll build it out of steel. Another says, I'll build it out of concrete. That goes in the first envelope. The cost proposal goes in the second envelope. Items to consider in drafting a request for proposals. On anything other than small projects, say less than 5 million, it's a good idea to pay competitors an honorarium for the intellectual property rights in their proposal. This is a good idea because, first of all, it's a lot of work to put together a good proposal, and B, it avoids lawsuits by losing competitors. How much? A starting point for this discussion might be about half a percentage point of the construction cost for honoraria. Secondly, in order to contain the budget for honoraria, it may be necessary to compromise a bit on my skepticism about the use of statements of qualifications and my no ranking recommendation in evaluating SOQs. If honoraria are to be paid, an SOQ should be used and a short list, say top 5, developed. This puts a limit on the amount your agency has to pay out for honoraria. If honoraria are paid, a variation is to pay the honoraria to those competitors who make the short list, while permitting all others who make the pass-fail grade are permitted to submit proposals contingent on their waiving all intellectual property rights in their proposals. And the most important item in an RFQ is the statement of needs, the conceptual plans and outline specifications prepared by the owner. The more definitive they are, the better the chances your agency or company will get what it needs. How detailed do they need to be? Somewhere between 5 and 30% of working drawings, I think, is reasonable. Also consider in an RFP incorporating by reference mandatory design and construction standards, and these are available. Specify the agency's expectations for the technical proposals, i.e. you want to see floor plans, elevations, etc., plumbing schematics, whatever you feel you need to see in the technical proposals. Incorporate by reference mandatory design and construction standards. For example, requiring that the design and construction be in conformance with the Uniform Facilities Criteria and the Uniform Facilities Guide specifications of the United States government. The competitors should be allowed to request exemptions from these standards, but they have to be requested and approved by the owner, in my view. Specify the agency's expectations for what you want to see in the technical proposals, and remember that the technical proposals should provide contractually enforceable commitments and verifiable information, not just plans, because a plan is nothing but a plan. The most important consideration in evaluating technical proposals is whether or not it satisfies the agency's statement of needs. There may be a temptation to want to make subjective judgments that one technical proposal is better than another. For instance, this building is more attractive than that one. Brick is better than stucco. VAV is better than terminal reheat, etc. This must be avoided if subjectivity is to be kept out of the procurement process. The way to avoid the temptation to make subjective judgments is to do a thorough job of preparing your agency or company's statement of needs, that is, the conceptual plans and outline specifications. If your agency or company needs certain architectural attributes, it should define them in the conceptual plans and outline specification. If it needs a brick building, it should define it in the conceptual plans and specifications. The same with a VAV, HVAC system, etc., etc. All technical proposals that satisfy the agency's statement of needs and other proposal requirements advance to the cost proposal stage. If only the quote best three end quote are allowed to advance, subjective judgment is creeping into the procurement process. Also, there should be no ranking of technical proposals. Again, to do so allows subjective judgment into the procurement process. Moving now to the next step, which is the cost proposals. The cost proposal envelopes are opened for the competitors whose technical proposals satisfy the owner's statement of needs. They are opened and the contract is awarded based on lowest cost. So when, as the saying goes, it gets down to the rubber meeting the road, the final decision is made based upon the objective criterion of lowest price. So that's the two envelopes process. The second process that I believe can be used to implement design build in an ethical manner is construction management with competitive bidding of trade subcontracts. A request for proposals for construction management services is issued, and the construction management services are defined as including the architect engineer services and requiring competitive bidding of construction trade subcontracts. A construction manager is selected based on subjective criteria such as experience and qualifications. This is analogous to the way in the traditional design build process the architect engineer contract is awarded based on subjective criteria such as experience and qualifications. The company or agency and the selected competitor negotiate a fee for construction management services. Again, this includes the architect engineer services. And the cost to the agency is the sum of the construction management fee plus the cost of all competitively bid contracts. These are what the steps look like in the construction management with competitive bidding of trade subcontracts. Request for qualifications is issued for the design build, for the construction management contract. Qualifications are evaluated. The owner, the agency, or the company makes a subjective decision who is the best construction management firm, and remember that the architect engineer services, the design services, are encompassed within the construction management contract. A price for the construction management is negotiated between the owner and the selected competitor, and a construction management contract is awarded. The construction manager then undertakes to prepare definitive working drawings and specifications for the various subcontracts that are necessary to get the project built. So a comprehensive, definitive working drawings and specifications are prepared, for example, for the plumbing subcontract. Plumbing subcontractors, competitors bid competitively on the basis of price for that subcontract. The lowest price competitor is awarded the contract, and that's how the plumbing work gets done. And this continues through all of the many construction subcontracts that are needed in order to get a project built. The point is that with this competitive bidding of trade subcontracts, the benefit of the competitive bidding for the trade subcontracts flows to the benefit of the owner. The savings go to the owner, not to the general contractor or construction manager. The construction manager is being compensated based on a negotiated fee. And the let's move on here to some this procurement process does obviously allows a somewhat larger percentage of the total project cost to be awarded based on subjective criteria, but the largest portion is procured using the objective criterion of lowest cost based on competitive bidding of the trade subcontracts. For example, in a traditional design build process, about 5 to 10% of the project cost is awarded to an engineering firm based on subjective criteria such as experience and qualifications, and the remaining 90 to 95% is procured based on the objective criterion of lowest cost based on competitive bidding. With the construction management with competitive bidding of trade subcontracts process, about 15 to 25% of the project cost is awarded to a construction management firm based on subjective criteria such as experience and qualifications, and the remaining 75 to 85% is procured based on the objective criterion of lowest cost based on competitive bidding. Allowing this increased project cost to be awarded based on subjective criteria is a reasonable compromise to obtain the benefits of the design, build, construction, delivery process. Some comments on the steps in the construction management with competitive bidding of trade subcontracts process. First of all, bear in mind that the architect engineer services are encompassed by the construction management services, and they are not a trade subcontract. The construction manager is selected, as indicated, based on subjective criteria such as experience and qualification. The agency or company and the selected construction management competitor negotiate a fee for construction management services, which includes the design services. So the cost to the agency or company is the sum of the construction management fee plus the cost of all competitively bid trade subcontracts. As indicated, this means that in order to obtain the benefits of design build, and I did earlier indicate that I believed that there were two substantive ones that were worth retaining, about 25% of the project cost is awarded based on subjective criteria, compared to around 10% with the traditional design bid build, and 75% on the objective criterion of cost, competitive bidding of the trade subcontracts. This, in my view, is a reasonable trade. Addressing the design build ethical issues will not be easy because it requires adjustments in laws, regulations, policies, and practices in the public and, to a lesser extent, private sectors. The interests that will oppose changes have proven to be very effective in the public policy arena, have significant vested interests in maintaining the design build status quo. And I must say, engineers have a long history of ineffectual involvement in shaping public policy. Left unchanged, the probable course of events will be the same as that which led to the adoption of competitive bidding as the law of the land over a century ago. Corruption in award of public and possibly private contracts can be concealed from the public for only so long. Sooner or later, it comes to light, and when it does, the public will demand reinstitution of competitive bidding in public agency procurements, and design bid build will again be the law of the land. Those who believe the design build construction delivery process has merit would be well advised to move for laws, regulations, policies, and practices that institutionalize design build construction procurement processes that are based on the objective criterion of lowest cost based on competitive bidding, such as the two processes I have suggested here. Otherwise, the public is going to throw out the design build construction delivery process baby along with the current design build construction procurement bathwater of awarding contracts based on subjective criteria. And with that, I see that we are now at the end of our allotted time, and I'm going to bring things to a conclusion here. I hope you have found this to be a little bit interesting. We'll give you something to think about moving forward, and perhaps we can see if we can implement design build in an ethical manner moving forward. So thanks again for letting me chat with you today, and have a nice rest of the day. Thanks a lot. Bye.